I can hear my own breathing before I hear anything else. I don't know if it's because the night is so still, or because my ears have decided that the sound of air moving in and out of my lungs is the only thing in the world that matters. My pulse rises and falls in a long, heavy rhythm, like the tide. It takes me back to an evening from my childhood. I was 8 years old, sitting on the floor of our living room in Memphis, staring at a glass of soda on the coffee table while my mother paced the room. She'd just lied to my father about where she'd been that afternoon. He didn't believe her, but he kept quiet. He always did. I remember the taste in my mouth that night. Too sweet. Too bitter. I remember thinking if I closed my eyes, maybe the lie wouldn't be there when I opened them. That was the first time I realized how powerful betrayal could be. It eats at you, day by day. It never leaves. Not even decades later. I feel that same taste in my mouth now. And again I listen to my own breathing. Slow. Forced. Measured. Trying to keep my hands from shaking. I'm gripping the edge of our dining table, leaning over the polished wood, picturing the small label I saw this afternoon. A cardboard box, black marker scrawled across it, Chris. A name that sure as hell isn't mine. The day started with me noticing her new shirt, bright red, hugging her figure in a way that felt meant for someone else's gaze. She said she was going out for a girls' day, maybe some coffee and window shopping. But she came back with a box she didn't bother hiding. For a split second, I convinced myself it might be a gift for her dad or her cousin. Then I saw the name. That was the moment the floor shifted under my feet. She set the box down on the kitchen counter like nothing was wrong. Like she wanted me to see it. Or maybe she was too lost in her own world to realize I was even here. She didn't say a word. I tried to keep my face neutral, the same way I did as a kid when I'd watch my mother spin her stories. I learned early that if you show your anger, your pain, if you let them see you tremble, you hand them power. So I stood, knuckles tight, heart banging in my chest. I turned, and I went to the garage. I felt that old bitterness as soon as I reached the car. Her car. The same one she'd been taking to work a suspicious number of times, judging by the mileage on the odometer. I opened the glove compartment, rummaged around. Found the extra set of keys I knew she hid in there, just in case. Ran my fingertips over the worn edges. I thought about how many miles had been racked up in the last month. The last year. How many secrets traveled in those miles. I felt a slow burn, starting in my stomach. Anger, sure, but also something deeper. A sense of being completely unmoored, like everything I'd thought was real, everything we'd built together, was rotting from the inside out. I slammed the glove compartment shut. The door rattled with the impact, echoing in the stillness of the garage. My phone buzzed in my pocket. A text, but I didn't check it. I didn't care who it was. Right then, I was in that place where you float between action and paralysis, where your body is calling for vengeance, for something big and destructive, but your mind is blank, not sure which step to take first. Eventually, I just walked back into the house. She was in the shower. I could hear water running behind the closed bathroom door. I picked up the box. A smooth, professional sticker along the side read, "Custom engravings." There was no reason to open it. The label gave me a perfect idea already. But I'm not a man who leaves loose threads. I pulled at the tape, peeled back the flaps, and stared at what was inside. A silver cufflink set and a matching bracelet, all in a foam cutout. Underneath was a small envelope, sealed with a heart-shaped sticker. I stared at that envelope longer than I care to admit. I wanted to tear it open, see the words she wrote, no doubt some soft, playful promise she'd give him the next time they met. Or maybe pictures. Maybe something else. My thumb hovered over the heart sticker. I could feel my breathing again, heavy and slow. I let the envelope be. I closed the box. My breath came in a low hiss through my teeth, like I was bracing for a punch in the gut. I stood there by the kitchen counter, waiting for my mind to organize itself. The shower turned off. I heard rustling as she stepped out, footsteps going into the bedroom. The door opened a crack. She looked at me from down the hall. "You okay?" she asked. I took a moment before answering. She wore a towel wrapped around her, hair dripping at her shoulders. Despite everything, my eyes trailed down her collarbone, to the droplets of water sliding over the skin I once thought belonged to me alone. I pictured someone else's hands sliding down her sides. And I hated the image of my own imagination. I said, "Yeah," in a voice that sounded way too casual in my ears. I carefully placed the box on the counter, label facing away from me as if I could hide it. "Just remembered I got some things in the garage to sort out," I added, trying to fill the silence. She stood there, face unreadable. For a moment, I thought she might come out with something, an excuse, a half-lie. But she didn't. She just disappeared back into the bedroom. A few seconds later, I heard the hairdryer. The normalcy of that hum was almost insulting. How was it that I felt like the world was falling apart, and yet everything looked so ordinary? The faucet dripped, the laundry machine beeped, life kept on going. Unchanged. I looked at the box again, reading that name in my mind. Chris. Over and over. Like pressing on a bruise to feel the sting. That's when it came to me, she wasn't even trying to cover her tracks now. Maybe that was the sign, it was real, out in the open, and she'd stopped caring whether I found out. Or maybe she assumed I was too blind to piece it together. Well, I sure as hell wasn't blind. Asterisk. Hours later, I lay in bed, staring up at the ceiling fan. She was next to me, turned on her side, her breathing shallow, presumably asleep. I'm not sure how I fell into that half-sleep that night, but at some point the old memory of my mother jolted me awake. I remembered one of the times she came home with lipstick on her blouse, perfume that wasn't hers, and a nervous smile. My father never confronted her, just mumbled something like, "Glad you're home safe." And me, I just watched from around the corner, thinking maybe I was crazy for suspecting anything. Maybe I was a bad son for imagining the worst. But I had that same sense of dread in my gut, the sense that we all knew but didn't want to say it out loud. In the dark, I felt the sheets shift. My wife's breathing changed. She rolled closer and put a hand on my chest. I felt the warmth of her skin, the faint smell of body lotion. For a moment, I wanted to pull her in, bury my face in her hair, pretend nothing was wrong. But my arms stayed at my sides, rigid and cold. "Babe," she murmured, voice thick with sleep, "you're so tense." I said nothing. If I opened my mouth, I wasn't sure what might come out, anger, heartbreak, a sob. I swallowed, tried to find that numb place inside my chest. She slid her hand down, across my stomach, toward my thigh. I closed my eyes because I could almost see him in that touch. The idea that maybe she'd touched him this same way, whispered the same words in his ear, made my heart pound. "It's late," I whispered, half apology, half avoidance. She let out a soft sigh, disappointed. Rolled away. A minute later, I heard her breathing steady out. My fists clenched in the sheets until the tension hurt my knuckles. I thought of that stupid box in the kitchen, the name scribbled in black marker. I wanted to smash it, or fling it across the room. But a calm part of me, some leftover piece of the boy I was, the boy who learned to hide how much it hurt, told me, wait. Watch. Figure out how to use this knowledge. Asterisk. The next day, I went through my usual routine. Alarm at 6:30. Coffee. A quick shower. She was already out. She'd told me she had a meeting, but I noticed she wasn't dressed in her usual business attire. Something more casual, sexier. I let it pass. I said, "Have a good one," with a forced grin that felt like it weighed 1,000 pounds. She barely looked at me, just grabbed her purse and left. I stared at our living room, framed wedding photos, a painting we bought together on our first trip to Denver, the marks on the wall from moving our furniture around every spring. This house was supposed to be our future, the place we'd grow old in. Now, the walls felt too close, pressing in on me with the weight of everything unsaid. I ended up in the garage again. The hush in there was comforting. My old car, some dusty boxes of tools, an ancient lawnmower. My wife's car was gone. I leaned against the workbench, remembering how proud she was the day we bought her that little sedan, brand new, fresh smell, seats pristine. Now, it seemed tainted. Like the memory of her excitement was overshadowed by the knowledge that she'd used that same car to carry secrets and lies. She used to text me from that driver's seat, pictures of the coffee she'd picked up, or a silly snapshot of her messing around with the radio. Now, I imagined her leaning back in that seat, phone in hand, maybe sending pictures to someone else. The mental image made my stomach twist. I paced for a while, letting anger swirl around me like a slow, poisonous cloud. Then I picked up a rag and started wiping the oil from some old wrenches, letting my mind drift. I thought about how I'd feel if I confronted her. Would she deny it, or laugh it off, or promise she'd end it? Would I believe her? Could I? Something about remembering my father's quiet acceptance kept me from confronting her that day. I suppose I'd inherited that stoic front. But it wasn't out of cowardice, not entirely. It was a sense of wanting a clear plan, a final, definitive blow. Because if this woman, my wife, was going to betray everything we built, I needed her to understand just how deep that betrayal cut. And I wanted to see her face when she realized I wasn't the same naive little boy who used to pretend lies were the truth. Asterisk. That evening, she came home around 8. I was nursing a beer in the living room. The TV was on some documentary about airplanes. I can't recall a single thing they said, but the noise was comforting. She walked in with a shopping bag, bigger than usual, and her cheeks were flushed. I could smell a whiff of cologne that definitely wasn't mine. She sat next to me on the couch, too close, like she wanted me to kiss her hello. I didn't move. I just stared at the screen. She said, "Long day." I let out a breath. Yeah. She glanced at my face as if searching for something, maybe a hint of suspicion. She gave me a peck on the cheek, so quick it felt mandatory, then she went to the kitchen. I heard the rustle of the plastic bag, the sound of her rummaging in the fridge. A few minutes later, she reappeared with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "Thought we could share a drink tonight," she offered, almost too brightly. I looked at her, seeing the shift in her posture, the way she tried to maintain eye contact. She looked anxious. And that made me certain something had shifted in her world. Maybe she realized I wasn't playing along with her fantasy of normal life. Maybe she saw in my eyes that I knew. But I just took the glass when she poured it for me, sipped once, and said, "Sure. Let's." We chatted about harmless things, the neighbor's new dog, her coworkers, my job. Each topic felt like a forced step in a choreographed dance. The tension in the air was thick, but unspoken. Eventually, she excused herself and went upstairs, claiming she had to get some rest. I finished my wine in silence, noticing how my reflection in the TV screen looked worn out, haunted. I thought about the next move. Should I follow her, press her, demand the truth? Or should I do something else entirely? My phone buzzed again. This time I looked. A friend from out of state texting me about an old engine part 1 was selling online. That's when a thought occurred. We'd used Craigslist once to sell a battered sofa, then again to buy some antique chairs for the dining room. As I stared at my phone, a plan started to form. My fingertips tingled. The image of her car, so symbolic of her other life, crystallized in my mind. If I sold that car, it would be more than just a financial move. It would be a statement: you don't get to leave me in the dark. I will do something. I will take away the freedom you used so easily to slip out of my life. I typed a few lines in a Craigslist draft: 2017 sedan, good condition, quick sale, no questions asked. Then I paused, realized what it meant, what it said about me. A part of me worried it was too much. Another part felt an odd sense of grim satisfaction. I saved the draft for the night, deciding to see how I felt in the morning. Asterisk. Days blurred. My wife's routine didn't change, gone in the mornings, back in the evenings, always a little too late, always with a slight flush to her cheeks. Meanwhile, I drifted through my job, half aware, half lost in planning. I thought about confronting the lover, this Chris guy, maybe calling him, or hacking my wife's phone. But that wasn't my style. I've never been the type to throw punches. No, my form of retribution needed to be colder, more measured. At night, I'd sometimes find myself listening to her phone buzz from the bedside table. She'd glance at it, press her lips together, and let the call ring out until it stopped. Then she'd exhale, roll away from me. I started spending more time in the garage. Or locking myself in my small office, flipping through old receipts, old pictures of us smiling at each other. I was trying to spot the moment the distance started. Maybe it was always there. Maybe we just never admitted it. Asterisk. The day I put up the official Craigslist ad, I woke up earlier than usual, made a quick pot of coffee, and typed out everything, the car's details, the mileage, the price so low it almost felt like theft. Must sell immediately, I wrote. Owner can't maintain. I posted a couple of pictures I had from months back. The next couple of hours, I refreshed the listing, waiting for the first nibble. I don't know what I expected. Part of me thought, no one will buy a car that cheap without asking why. But then again, there are always people hungry for a deal, not caring about the backstory. By mid-afternoon, I had 3 emails. 2 sounded serious. By evening, I had a phone number. A man named Dean wanted to see it first thing tomorrow. I kept this to myself. She came home that night, found me sitting in the garage, rummaging around. She gave me a weird look when she saw the hood of her car propped open. Everything okay with the car, she asked, her voice tight. Yeah, I said, in that too casual tone. Just checking fluids. Making sure it's all in good shape. She hesitated, like a part of her was ready to question me. Then she just sighed and moved inside. I watched her walk away, hips swaying in those tight jeans she used to wear on date nights. Once, that sway would have stirred up warmth and desire in me. But now, all I felt was a dull ache of resentment. That body, that face, that voice, given away to another man's touch, another man's compliments. I closed the hood slowly, feeling a small surge of finality. Tomorrow, if everything worked out, that car would be gone. Asterisk. The sale happened faster than I thought. Dean showed up, gave a quick glance at the exterior, nodded. We agreed on a price that was borderline insulting to me, but I didn't care. I just wanted it out. The transaction took less than an hour, mostly because I already had the title, the spare key, everything. We stood in the driveway, signing papers on the trunk of the car. The sun beat down, and sweat pooled at the back of my neck. But my hands didn't shake. Not once. When it was done, Dean smiled. Pleasure doing business, he said. You sure you want to let it go for that little? I shrugged. Sure. Times change, priorities shift. He patted the roof, drove off with a grin so wide he looked like he'd won the lottery. I watched the taillights recede down the street, a strange hollowness in my chest. That was the car we once took on road trips, the car she used to drive me in when I wanted to take a break and let her have the wheel. I remembered the day we got it, how she leaned in to kiss me in the dealership parking lot, so happy that we could afford something brand new. All of it gone now, in the time it took to sign a couple documents. I went back into the garage. The space where the car had been seemed huge, empty. I left it that way, refusing to park my own car in that spot. It felt like a small monument to the hole that was forming in my marriage. Asterisk. She came home that afternoon. I was in the living room, the TV off, the lights off, blinds drawn. I heard the door slam, then her voice pitched high. "Where's my car?" I stayed seated, elbows on my knees, staring at the floor. "Martin." Her footsteps came closer. "Where is my car?" I looked up slowly. "I sold it." Her mouth dropped open, eyes wide. At first, no words. Just raw shock. Then a burst of anger, like a switch flicked in her brain. "What the hell do you mean, you sold it? That's my car. You can't just..." She stopped, fists clenched, face turning red. "Are you insane?" I watched her, my breathing slow and steady, that old training from childhood. I said nothing, letting her storm around the living room, fling her purse onto the coffee table. "Why would you do this?" she demanded. "You can't just sell someone else's car behind their back, Martin." Her words hung there, furious, accusatory. But for the first time in a long while, I felt a cold calm. "I can." I did. She stared at me, lips parted like she was about to hurl a dozen more insults. Then her expression twisted. "Is this about us?" she managed, voice cracking. "You couldn't have just talked to me." I stood, slowly, letting the tension seep into every motion. It felt cinematic, like the world was in slow motion. "Talk to you?" I repeated, voice low. "What would I say, exactly? That I found a box you didn't hide? That it had another man's name on it? That I've seen how you look when you come home?" For a second, she looked truly cornered. Her eyes flicked around the room, like she was searching for a script that didn't exist. This is not," she let out a harsh breath, tried again. "It's not what you think." I let out a short, bitter laugh. "Oh, no. Then by all means, enlighten me." Her jaw worked, but no sound came. She turned away, pressing a palm to her forehead, as if that could block out reality. Finally, she spat out something about me being paranoid, about it being a gift for a cousin, some excuse that rang hollow even to her own ears. I shook my head. "I'm done listening to lies." She whirled back. "You can't just sabotage our lives like this. Selling my car, humiliating me. You're out of your mind." Her voice rose to a shriek. I'd never heard her that loud, that unhinged. She grabbed a vase from the side table, an old piece of cheap glass we'd had for ages, and she looked like she wanted to smash it. I took a slow step toward her, my eyes locked on hers. "Go ahead," I said, my voice barely above a whisper. "Break it if you want. It won't change the fact that your little secret's out." For a moment, I thought she might fling it at me. Instead, she set it down with a heavy thud, breathing ragged. Then she backed away, stumbling over the coffee table. "You're pushing me away," she said, her voice trembling. "I can't believe you'd go this far." I didn't move. I didn't speak. I just let her words hang there, let that quiet tension fall between us like a wall. We both knew what was happening. The marriage we'd built was shattering, piece by piece, lie by lie. Asterisk. She spent that night in the guest room. I heard her crying behind the closed door. I wanted to feel pity. I wanted to feel sadness, even longing. Instead, I felt numb, except for the occasional burn of anger that flared in my chest. I didn't sleep much. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw that cardboard box, saw that name. Saw, in my mind's eye, her with him, maybe in a motel room, or in his fancy studio, or in the passenger seat of that damned car. Imagining his hands on her waist, her lips parting in a sigh meant for him. My teeth ground together until my jaw ached. Asterisk. In the morning, she came downstairs, hair a mess, face blotchy from crying. She'd thrown on some old sweatpants and a hoodie, not bothering with her usual routine. She mumbled something about needing to go out. Need a ride somewhere? I asked, mildly. The glare she gave me could have cut glass. She grabbed her purse, dug around for her phone, and walked out the door. I heard her calling a friend, asking for a lift. I closed my eyes, feeling a wave of exhaustion. Part of me wanted to run after her, say something to break the stalemate. But I stayed where I was, hands jammed in my pockets. We'd gone too far for easy words. I heard the friend's car pull up, the muffled conversation, then the engine fading as they drove off. Alone in the house, I found myself remembering the day I told my father I'd gotten engaged. He was already frail from years of heart trouble. He looked at me with a faint smile, pressed a hand to my shoulder, and said, "Just don't let yourself get blind." At the time, I thought he was talking about money or the stress of a new life. But maybe he saw something in me, that same acceptance he'd once shown my mother, and worried I'd go numb in my own marriage. Well, no more numbness. I'd made a statement by selling the car, but the anger was still there, pulsing in my veins. This woman who slept in my bed had given her heart, or at least her body, to another man. And I was left with the scraps of what we used to have. Asterisk. She returned hours later, stepping inside with that same friend in tow. I stayed in the dining room, leaning against the table. Her friend's eyes flickered to me nervously, and I realized that I recognized her from a few times they went shopping together. She gave me a forced smile, then turned to my wife. "I'll just wait in the car," she muttered, making a quick exit. I studied my wife's face. There was a forced calm in it, like she'd reapplied her mask. "I need to pack some things," she said quietly. I raised an eyebrow. "You leaving?" She swallowed. "Just for a bit. I need space, Martin. I can't breathe here." A small part of me wanted to laugh. She couldn't breathe here, in this house we built together, because of what exactly? Her own guilt. But I didn't laugh. I nodded, once, stepping aside as she moved upstairs. I could hear drawers opening and closing. I didn't follow. I stayed downstairs, letting the minutes drag. My mind felt oddly blank, the adrenaline from the confrontation mostly spent. There was a sense of inevitability. She'd share her version of the story, claim I was erratic, that she chose to walk away, painting me as the cause. And maybe that was fair. Maybe it was easier for her to say I'd lost my mind, to avoid admitting she was cheating. She came down with a small suitcase, hair pulled back in a messy ponytail, face set in a grim line. Our eyes met, and for a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of regret or sadness. But it was gone as quickly as it appeared. She opened her mouth to speak, closed it, then turned and walked out. The front door clicked shut behind her. I listened to the engine start, the friend's car pulling away, and then silence. A suffocating silence, thick and heavy. Asterisk. Over the next few days, I didn't call her. She didn't call me. I went to work, came home, repeated. The emptiness in the house felt even larger than before, like every piece of furniture was shouting her absence. I tried to focus on practical matters, bills, groceries, the fact that I should probably start thinking about what came next. But my thoughts circled back to that box with the name, Chris, to the missing puzzle pieces of how, when, why. Some nights I'd lie awake, imagining them tangled in bed, imagining the quiet moans that used to be mine to hear. And I'd feel the sting all over again, a mixture of heartbreak and rage. A couple times, neighbors asked me where she was, if everything was okay. I just shrugged, mumbled that she was visiting family or something. It reminded me of how my father used to brush off questions about my mother's whereabouts. The parallels made me nauseous. Eventually, her parents called. I recognized their number on the screen, debated not picking up, but in the end, I answered. Her father's voice was stiff. "Heard you two are having some trouble," he said. "She came by. Spent a couple nights with us. Yeah, I said. No explanation. I didn't owe him that. He sighed. She says you sold her car. Son, that's not typical behavior. Are you all right? I almost laughed. I'm fine, I lied. We have some problems. That's all. He cleared his throat. Well, if you need to talk. Thanks, I cut him off, I appreciate it. I didn't. I just wanted to end the call. When I hung up, I felt a rush of relief. At least she was safe somewhere. Part of me had worried she'd run off with the lover, but apparently not yet. Maybe she was easing her family into that story. Maybe she was telling them I was the bad guy, that I was controlling, or paranoid, or unhinged. Let them believe what they want. Asterisk. I found out about the final straw in a stupidly mundane way. A coworker I barely knew asked me if I was all right. Said he'd seen my wife around town with a friend, asked if we were separated. I brushed it off, but it felt like a punch to the gut. She wasn't even hiding it now. That night, I discovered I couldn't stay in the house anymore. The walls felt haunted by every memory of her. I grabbed a handful of clothes, my laptop, and headed to a cheap motel on the outskirts of the city. It was the kind of place with a flickering neon sign, a cramped front desk, and hallways that smelled like stale cigarettes. But it was quiet. And it wasn't home. I needed not home. For hours, I lay on the lumpy mattress, half listening to the traffic outside. My phone buzzed occasionally with texts, work, a friend checking in, a spam message. Not a single one from her. I was torn between wanting to hear from her and dreading the possibility. This limbo was excruciating. At some point, I drifted into a restless sleep. Dreams twisted around my mother, my wife, and a faceless figure that might have been Chris. In the dream, they were all laughing at me, pointing fingers. I woke with a jolt, sweat cooling on my forehead, my heart pounding like a hammer. My breathing again was loud in my ears, that ragged inhalation and exhalation that told me I was still alive, but maybe just barely. Asterisk. A few days later, she turned up at the house unexpectedly. I'd gone back to pick up some mail, water the plants, keep the place from looking completely abandoned. When I opened the door, she was there in the living room, rummaging through a drawer, presumably looking for something. My heart kicked in my chest, but I forced my face to remain impassive. What are you doing here? She spun around, startled. For a moment, we stood there, eyes locked. She looked thinner, the dark circles under her eyes more pronounced. I'm looking for some documents, she said in a hoarse voice. We're not speaking, so I figured I'd do this quietly. I nodded, stepping aside so she could continue. She rifled through the drawer, found an envelope, tucked it under her arm. Then she paused, turned to me, expression guarded. What are you going to do, Martin? She asked softly. About everything. I shrugged. I'm surviving. That's what I'm doing. She swallowed, gaze flicking to the floor. Are we done, then? Is that it? Her voice was barely above a whisper. I wanted to say so many things. Wanted to unleash the fury that had been building for weeks, to demand explanations, to see the guilt on her face. But I found that the anger had burned itself down to embers. In its place was just fatigue, a bone-deep weariness. Honestly, I said, I think we've been done for a while. We just didn't admit it. She nodded, tears shining in her eyes, but she blinked them back. You know. I never wanted to hurt you. I felt a sardonic laugh slip out. No. You just wanted something else. Something you thought you deserved, right? She flinched, and that gave me a tiny, vicious spark of satisfaction. But it faded quickly. She stared at me, and I met her gaze, letting silence fill the space between us. Then she turned, hurried toward the door. I followed, not to stop her, but to see her out. At the threshold, she paused. Her head bowed. "I'm sorry," she breathed, so low I could hardly hear it. Then she was gone. Asterisk. Over the next few weeks, she told her friends that she left me, that I'd become distant and cold, that I was never there for her. I know this because one of her closest friends, who'd always been on the periphery of our circle, hesitantly told me she'd heard the story and wasn't sure what to believe. She also told me that one of the others had asked, "But what about those expensive gifts? Where'd they come from?" and my wife apparently hadn't answered. I wasn't surprised. Lies breed more lies, and eventually you can't keep them straight. Let her spin whatever tale she needed. I had no more illusions about rescue or reconciliation. We'd broken each other in ways that words couldn't mend. I filed for separation. The legal part was quick, surprisingly easy. I used some of my savings to rent a small place near my job. Nothing fancy, but big enough for me to breathe. And for the first time in a long time, I found moments of quiet where I didn't feel like screaming or throwing something. I was alone, but in that solitude, I discovered a kind of clarity. I knew I wasn't the naive boy who let lies slide. I'd taken a stand, in my own cold way. Asterisk. One evening, sitting on the sagging couch of my new rental, I found myself holding the only piece of her car I'd kept, the keychain. A tiny plastic fob with a picture of us from years back, smiling in front of Niagara Falls. She'd left it in a drawer. I rubbed my thumb over the faded image, recalling the swirl of mist around us that day, how she giggled when the wind whipped her hair into our faces. We looked happy. Maybe we were. But it was a happiness built on illusions, her illusions of something bigger, my illusions of loyalty. I thought I might cry. But the tears never came. Instead, I felt a sensation like a vice loosening around my chest. A faint relief. Because the worst was done, wasn't it? She'd betrayed me, I'd responded with an act of revenge, and now there was nowhere left to go but forward. I closed my eyes, recalling the last words she said, "I never wanted to hurt you." The boy I once was might have believed that. The man I am now knows that wanting something more can tear apart what you already have, whether you intend harm or not. A lie is still a lie, no matter how gently it's told. Asterisk. Weeks passed. I put my energy into work, into small tasks around the rental, into phone calls with my mother that I tried to keep brief. She sensed something had shifted, but I offered no details. I was done with old wounds. I had enough new ones. One afternoon, after a long day, I stopped by the old house for the last time to collect some boxes, things I'd left behind, a set of tools, some personal trinkets, old photos. It was nearly empty now. She'd taken some furniture. The real estate agent was scheduled to put it on the market next month. I wandered through the silent rooms, running my hand along the walls. In the master bedroom, I saw the faint outline on the carpet where our bed had been. Where we'd slept side by side for years, where she once touched me with warmth. Where she'd started to slip away into her secrets. I let out a shaky breath, hearing it echo back at me. My own breathing, slow and heavy, filling my ears the way it did whenever I was alone with my thoughts. I remembered how, as a child, that sound was both comforting and terrifying, comforting because it meant I was alive, terrifying because it meant I had to keep living with the knowledge of my mother's betrayals. Now, that knowledge had come full circle in my own marriage. I carried my boxes out to the car, the late afternoon sun warming the driveway. I felt oddly calm. The rage had long since burned away, leaving behind a hollow acceptance. I was no saint, but I also wasn't the fool I once was. Maybe that was enough for now. Asterisk. A month later, I learned she'd moved in with Chris. A mutual acquaintance dropped the information in a casual conversation, unaware that it would slam into my chest. I nodded like it was nothing. But that night, in my small apartment, I felt the old bitterness coil through my gut again. I pictured their place, their shared bed, the box with his name on it resting somewhere on a dresser. Maybe that engraved bracelet was clasped around his wrist at this very moment. Or maybe he'd tossed it aside, the novelty worn off. I tried to let it go. Some days, I succeeded. Other days, I'd catch myself dwelling on the details, driving myself mad with hypotheticals. I'd remember that day she came home smelling of cologne and wonder exactly what they'd done, where they'd been. My imagination filled in the gaps with images I wished I could erase. Then, one quiet evening, I sat in the apartment, no TV, no music, just the hum of the refrigerator in the other room. My phone buzzed. It was her name on the screen. My pulse jumped. I hadn't heard from her in weeks. For a moment, I just stared at it, deciding whether to pick up. Then I pressed accept and held the phone to my ear. She said my name softly, like she was testing the water. I said, yes, in a tone that felt lifeless. She hesitated. I'm sorry for how things ended. I hope you're okay. The old me might have read into that, might have found a shred of hope or an invitation for some reconciliation. But I'm not that man anymore. I'm fine, I said. I hope you're all right too. A pause. Yeah. I am. Silence stretched. Maybe she wanted me to ask about Chris, or about her life. I wasn't going to. She cleared her throat. I'm not calling to, just wanted to say. I do think about you. Sometimes. I closed my eyes. I breathed, slow and deep. We both have memories, I said quietly. I've moved on from them. You should too. Her voice caught. I know. All right, well, bye, Martin. She hung up, leaving me with that strange final echo in my ear. I let the phone slip from my hand onto the couch. My heart was beating faster, but not with longing or regret. It was something else, maybe the last chords of the old life snapping free. Asterisk. Time passed. The sun rose and set, weeks turned into months. I signed the final papers for the house, parted ways with it cleanly. Life settled into a new routine. I started seeing a therapist, actually. A quiet woman with glasses who asked gentle questions that sometimes made me want to punch a wall. But over time, I found it helped to talk. To release the tension that had been stored in my muscles for years. I told her about my mother. How I learned not to show my emotions because I was afraid of giving anyone that power over me. I told her about my father, how he withered away under the weight of that broken marriage, how he never truly forgave or confronted the lies. And I told her about myself, about the moment I saw the box with that man's name on it, realized I was living the same story. The same role. She said, but you chose a different ending, Martin. You took action, you stood up. That's not nothing. I stared at the pattern on her office rug and felt something inside me ease. Asterisk. Now, I sit here in my apartment, listening to the hush of traffic from the street below. I can still hear my breathing if I concentrate, slow and rhythmic. My hands rest on my knees, not trembling. For once, I feel the absolute stillness in my own body. I never thought that would be possible after the betrayal, after the months of seeing everything we had unravel. But there it is, a quiet steadiness. I remember the day I sold her car as vividly as if it were 10 minutes ago. The slight squeak of the pen on the paper, the handshake with the stranger, the swirl of dust as he pulled away. Part of me wonders if that was too cruel. Another part knows I would do it again. Because it was never really about the car, it was about reclaiming my sense of self when everything else felt fake. I taste that bitterness sometimes, thinking about the nights she was in his arms, the excuses she made. But it doesn't consume me the way it used to. It's like a scar, tender but closed. The anger has mostly receded, leaving behind a kind of resigned acceptance. And in that acceptance, a small seed of hope that maybe I can be something other than the man who let someone's lies dictate his life. I don't know who I am now. But I know I'm not the same guy who gave trust so easily, who let his marriage become a quiet battlefield of secrets. I've learned what betrayal tastes like, metallic, cold, lingering at the back of your throat. I've learned that love, once broken, can't always be glued back together. Maybe one day I'll look back on all this and see it as a turning point, the moment I realized I had the strength to walk away from illusions. Or maybe it'll always just be that painful chapter when I sold my wife's car as an act of revenge. Either way, I won't pretend it didn't happen. I won't hide from it. Because I've been hiding since I was 8 years old, watching my mother come home in her perfume and lies, telling myself everything was fine. No more. I'm breathing slowly now, letting the air fill my lungs, letting it out in a measured stream. The night is quiet. I'm alone. There's an ache in my chest, but it's not the crippling kind. It's the kind that reminds you you're still alive. And for now, that's enough. I think about her sometimes, the way she used to smile in our pictures, the way she'd reach for my hand when we crossed the street. I think about how easily she let go of all that. Then I think about him, Chris, how he slid into our life like a whisper. I wonder if he ever feels guilty or if he's laughing in his new apartment, wearing that engraved bracelet, telling himself they were meant to be. Maybe. Maybe not. Doesn't matter. I close my eyes. The final image I see is the box with his name, the cardboard flaps, the silver bracelet shining in the kitchen light. That's when I realize that memory doesn't slice me open anymore. It's just a memory. A real one, but not something that has power over me. I exhale and stand up from my chair. My hands are steady at my sides. I can do a lot with steady hands. There's nothing left to say. So I let the silence wrap around me. It feels strange, being alone like this, but also a relief. At least in this silence, there are no more lies. And my breathing, for once in my life, feels calm. No tremor, no quake, just the slow, deliberate rhythm of a man who finally knows he can survive.